Hey there. Tonight we're wandering into a quieter side of history. The side people rarely put in textbooks because it's too strange, too human, and occasionally too mushroom-shaped. So get comfortable. Let your eyes rest. And if you're listening in bed, you don't need to remember anything. History will still be here in the morning, now. When most people picture the Middle Ages, they imagine mud, monasteries, and misery. And sure, there was plenty of that, but there were also regular people, curious people, living in a world with limited comfort, constant pain, and very few distractions. And when life is hard, humans do what humans have always done. They look for relief. They look for escape. They look for something, anything that makes the edges of reality feel a little softer. But medieval getting high didn't look like modern recreational culture. There weren't glossy dispensaries or carefully measured gummies. There was mostly guesswork, a garden, a fire, a bit of folklore, and a level of confidence that was wildly out of proportion to the safety of the situation. In medieval Europe, medicine did not live in bottles on clean shelves. It lived in soil, in forests, in monastery gardens, and in the careful hands of people who had learned, often through generations of trial, how to listen to the quiet language of plants. For the men and women of the Middle Ages, health was fragile. A simple fever could become fatal. A toothache might last for months. A wound from a tool or a battlefield could change the course of an entire life. There were no pharmacies, no modern painkillers, no hospitals in the way we understand them today. What existed instead was a world where nature itself was the first and most important healer. The medieval medicine cabinet was not a box at all. It was a garden behind a cottage, a basket hanging in a kitchen, a bundle of dried leaves stored in a monastery cellar. Knowledge of these remedies was precious, passed quietly from one generation to the next. Grandmothers taught daughters, monks taught apprentices, travelers carried stories of useful routes from village to village. Much of this knowledge was shaped by faith. People believed that the Creator had placed healing within the natural world, and that every plant had a purpose. Some were meant to nourish, some to comfort, and some, mysteriously, to challenge human wisdom. Healing was rarely seen as separate from prayer, humility, and gratitude. Monasteries became important centers of care. Within their walls, monks copied ancient medical texts from Greece and Rome. They studied the writings of Hippocrates and Galen, blending classical learning with Christian compassion. Many monasteries kept organized herb gardens where rows of rosemary, sage, mint, and lavender grew in neat, peaceful patterns. These gardens were tended with reverence. A monk, gathering leaves for a sick neighbor, might whisper a prayer before cutting the stem, believing that healing required both knowledge and grace. The hospital wards attached to monasteries were often the safest places a suffering person could be. Yet medieval medicine was always uncertain. Without microscopes or modern chemistry, people relied on observation. If a tea eased pain once, it became a remedy. If a root seemed to help sleep, it was remembered. Measurements were simple: a handful, a pinch, a cupful. Experience guided more than theory. Some treatments were gentle and wise. Willow bark was used for aching joints. Centuries before anyone knew it, contained a substance related to aspirin. Chamomile soothed troubled stomachs. Honey protected wounds from infection. Garlic was valued for strength and protection. But other remedies carried hidden dangers. The line between medicine and harm was thin, not because medieval people were careless, but because nature herself is powerful. A plant that calmed one person might overwhelm another. A dose meant to bring sleep could bring confusion instead. Healers held an important, complicated place in society. Official physicians existed in larger towns, trained at universities in places like Salerno or Paris. They spoke Latin and followed respected theories about balancing the body's humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Alongside them worked local healers, midwives, herbalists, and wise neighbors who knew the countryside better than any scholar. These people were often trusted deeply by their communities. When a child had fever or a mother faced childbirth, it was usually these humble healers who were called first. Their work was practical. and compassionate. They brewed teas to calm anxiety, mixed salves to ease burns, and used warm poultices to draw infection from wounds. Many of their methods, though simple, were rooted in careful observation of the body. Pain shaped medieval life more than we can easily imagine. A broken bone might never heal correctly. Surgery was performed without modern anesthesia. Even ordinary labor left bodies exhausted and sore. Because of this, any substance that offered relief was valued almost as a gift. Sleep itself was considered a form of healing. People believed that during deep rest, the body repaired what daylight had damaged. So many remedies were designed not to excite the mind, but to quiet it, to invite gentle dreams and peaceful breathing. Faith was woven through all of this. Illness was often understood as part of a larger spiritual journey. Healing meant more than removing symptoms. It meant restoring balance between body, soul, and community. A patient might receive both a cup of herbal drink and the comfort of prayer. This attitude created humility toward medicine. People knew that human knowledge was limited. They approached remedies with hope, but also with caution, aware that life ultimately rested in hands greater than their own. The medieval medicine cabinet therefore reflected the entire medieval worldview: trust in nature, trust in tradition, and trust in God's mercy. Not every treatment worked. Some failed quietly, some caused suffering, but many brought real comfort in a hard world, and the intention behind them was usually kindness. Imagine a small cottage at dusk. A mother heats water over a fire while her child sleeps restlessly nearby. She adds a few leaves given by an elderly neighbor, leaves said to calm the heart. The room fills with a gentle scent. Outside, the village grows quiet. In moments like this, medieval medicine was not strange or foolish. It was simply human, people doing their best with the knowledge they had, guided by faith and by love. And so the medicine cabinet of the Middle Ages was more than a collection of plants. It was a meeting place between earth and hope, between suffering and compassion. One of the better-known plants in the old European world was henbane, a humble-looking herb with pale flowers veined in purple and leaves that felt soft to the touch. It did not appear dangerous at first glance. To someone passing along a country path, it might have seemed no different from dozens of other roadside plants swaying quietly in the wind. Yet medieval people learned, slowly and carefully, that this plant carried a strong power. In small and cautious amounts, henbane could ease pain and encourage sleep. That alone made it precious. Life in the Middle Ages was filled with aches that had no simple cure, joints worn by labor, teeth that throbbed through long nights, wounds that burned as they healed. A cup of warm drink prepared with a few leaves might soften those edges and allow a tired body to rest. Sleep was considered a gift. Physicians and monks alike believed that peaceful rest helped the body return to balance. If henbane opened the door to such rest, it was welcomed into the household remedies of many regions. Midwives sometimes kept it among their stores, and travelers spoke of it as a comfort on difficult journeys. But medieval healers also knew that henbane possessed a second face. The same plant that soothed could also disturb. If too much was taken, or if it was prepared without sufficient care, the mind might begin to drift in strange directions. A person could grow restless, unable to sit still, or become confused about familiar places. Voices might seem nearer or farther than they truly were. Shapes in a room could feel alive with motion. To modern ears, these sound like symptoms to be listed in a medical book. To a medieval family gathered around a troubled relative, they felt like mysteries. People of that time did not separate body and spirit as sharply as we often do. When the mind wandered, many asked not only what was happening, but why. Some believed such experiences might be a sign that unseen realities were drawing close. Others feared that illness had opened a door best left shut. Priests urged discernment and prayer. Healers urged careful doses and observation. Neighbors shared stories, some comforting, some alarming, about others who had taken the plant and felt their thoughts loosen like untied knots. Henbane grew wild near villages, along the edges of fields and beside crumbling walls. Because it was common, it found its way into everyday life more easily than rarer herbs. Children were warned not to taste its seeds. farmers learned to recognize its scent, slightly bitter and heavy. Yet familiarity did not mean recklessness. Many households treated henbane with the same respect one might show a sharp tool or a strong fire, useful when guided, dangerous when ignored. Medieval recipe books describe careful methods. The leaves might be dried and added sparingly to other calming herbs. Sometimes they were steeped in wine or mixed with fats to create salves applied to aching limbs. The intention was almost always relief, never amusement. Records from monastic infirmaries speak of patients who finally slept after days of pain. Such moments felt close to mercy. In a world without modern comforts, even a few hours of quiet breathing could seem like a small miracle. Still, the warnings were repeated again and again. Do not exceed the measure. Give only to the strong of heart. Watch the patient as you would watch a candle in wind. These phrases reveal how seriously the plant was regarded. Stories traveled from town to town of those who misjudged the amount. A man might rise in the night and wander into the fields, speaking to people no one else could see. A woman might feel as though she were floating above her bed, unsure whether she slept or woke. Families, frightened and uncertain, sought help from both healers and clergy. Such reactions were interpreted through the beliefs of the age. Some saw them as trials sent to test patience, others as natural consequences of misused remedies. The medieval world allowed space for both explanations to exist side by side. What is striking is the compassion often shown in these accounts. People did not rush immediately to blame. They cared for the afflicted, cooled their foreheads, prayed beside them, and waited for the storm within the mind to pass. Henbane therefore lived in a delicate place within medieval culture, neither wholly trusted nor wholly rejected. It was a reminder that healing and harm can grow from the same soil, and that human knowledge must walk carefully. Even today, when scientists can name the substances inside the plant and explain how they affect the nerves, there remains something humbling about those earlier generations who faced such power with only experience to guide them. They learned through attention, through listening to elders, through watching the slow responses of the body, and they passed those lessons forward, wrapped in caution and reverence. If you imagine a medieval evening, the fire burning low, a healer measuring dried leaves with steady hands, you can sense how serious the moment would feel. The goal was not excitement, but peace, to ease suffering, to invite rest, to help a fellow traveler through another difficult night. That was the true place of henbane in the old medicine cabinet, a fragile bridge between pain and sleep, crossed with hope and with care. Among all the plants known to medieval Europe, few inspired as much wonder as mandrake. Unlike the ordinary herbs that grew quietly in gardens, mandrake carried with it a deep aura of mystery. Its root often divided into two thick limbs, giving it a shape that reminded people of a small human figure. In an age when symbols were taken seriously, that resemblance stirred imagination. Medieval people believed that creation spoke through signs. If a root looked like a person, perhaps it was meant to affect the human body in powerful ways. Physicians, monks, and village healers therefore approached mandrake with both hope and careful respect. In practical medicine, mandrake was valued mainly for one gift: sleep. When prepared properly, it could dull pain and bring a heavy drowsiness. Surgeons sometimes relied on it before difficult procedures. Travelers carried small portions to ease the discomfort of long journeys. Mothers spoke of its ability to calm restless nights. To people who lived without modern anesthetics, such a plant seemed almost providential. Yet mandrake was never considered simple. Even its harvesting was surrounded by solemn tradition. Stories warned that the root must be lifted from the earth with great care, as if one were waking a sleeping creature. These tales were not childish fantasies. They reflected a genuine awareness that the plant could be dangerous if handled without knowledge. Medieval herbals, beautiful manuscripts filled with painted illustrations, often showed mandrake drawn like a tiny person with leaves for hair. Next to the image Scribes recorded instructions passed down through generations. They described how the root should be dried, how little should be taken, and how it should be mixed with gentler herbs to soften its strength. The purpose was nearly always medical. People sought relief from agony, not adventure. When mandrake worked well, the effect was described as a deep, dream-filled rest. Patients might sleep through the setting of broken bones or the cleaning of infected wounds. In a time when such moments were terrifying, the ability to slip into unconsciousness felt like a blessing. But the same power that comforted could also confuse. Too strong a dose might leave a person drifting between waking and dreaming, unsure where one ended and the other began. Some spoke of vivid images, of voices remembered upon waking, of a strange heaviness in the limbs. Medieval families interpreted these experiences according to their faith and understanding, often with humility rather than panic. Clergy advised prayer and patience. Healers adjusted their mixtures. Communities watched over those affected until the mind returned to calm. Mandrake also entered the symbolic life of the Middle Ages. Because it seemed shaped like a human form, it was sometimes carried as a charm, meant to protect health or encourage fertility within marriage. These customs were not intended as rebellion against faith, but as expressions of trust that the natural world held gifts placed there for human need. Monastic writers, careful guardians of tradition, warned against superstition while still acknowledging the plant's medical usefulness. They walked a narrow path, honoring God as the source of all healing, yet recognizing that creation included remedies for suffering. This balance shaped the medieval attitude toward mandrake more than fear did. Across Europe, different regions developed their own ways of preparing it. Some places it was steeped gently in wine. In others, it was ground into powders and mixed with honey. Every method carried reminders to use small measures, to observe the patient, and to treat the plant with seriousness, because mistakes could be costly. Chronicles mention occasions when mandrake was taken unwisely and the sleeper did not wake as expected. Such tragedies deepened the respect surrounding the root. It was never an everyday herb like mint or sage. It remained something reserved for grave needs. Yet despite the caution, mandrake endured in the medieval medicine chest for centuries. That endurance tells us something important. People found real value in it. They would not have preserved its knowledge so carefully if it had offered only harm. Imagine a stone infirmary beside a monastery. A wounded traveler lies on a narrow bed. The surgeon prepares his tools while a brother grinds a tiny portion of mandrake with warm wine. A prayer is whispered, not out of fear, but out of reverence for the fragile life in their care. The drink is given, and the patient's breathing slowly softens. Scenes like this, repeated countless times, form the true history of mandrake. Not the frightening legends, but the quiet acts of mercy. Over generations, the plant became a symbol of the medieval approach to healing itself, a mixture of observation, tradition, faith, and caution. People understood that the earth held powerful gifts, yet those gifts required wisdom. Mandrake therefore stands as a reminder of how our ancestors faced suffering. They did not possess modern science, but they possessed patience. They lacked laboratories, but they had compassion. And in that spirit they tended a strange, human-shaped root and asked it gently to lend them a little peace. Along hedgerows and in shaded corners of medieval Europe grew a plant with glossy dark berries and soft purple flowers. It looked almost inviting, as though it belonged in a peaceful garden. Yet people spoke its name with care. Belladonna, the beautiful lady, also known as deadly nightshade. Few plants revealed the double nature of medieval medicine more clearly than this one. Healers learned early that belladonna held remarkable powers. In small, carefully measured amounts, it could quiet severe pain. It eased the trembling of muscles, calmed spasms in the stomach, and sometimes brought a heavy, dreamless sleep to those tormented by illness. For sufferers with no other relief, that comfort felt precious. Physicians wrote of its usefulness during difficult treatments. Midwives occasionally relied on it when childbirth became overwhelming. Traveling surgeons kept it among their most serious remedies. Yet everyone agreed on one truth: belladonna demanded respect. The same berries that looked so innocent could bring great harm if swallowed without knowledge. Children were warned never to touch them. Monastery gardens grew the plant only behind low fences, and its handling was often left to the most experienced hands. Medieval people did not understand the hidden chemicals within the leaves, but they understood consequences. Centuries of observation taught them that a little might heal, while a little more might unbalance the mind. Those who took too much sometimes felt their hearts race like frightened birds. The mouth would grow dry, vision blurred, and the world could begin to shimmer at the edges. Families witnessing such changes feared for the soul as well as the body, and they turned quickly to prayer and to trusted healers. Because of this danger, belladonna was rarely used alone. It was mixed with gentler herbs, lavender, balm, or warm milk to soften its force. Recipes emphasized patience. Let the mixture stand, strain it carefully, give only a few drops, and watch. These instructions reveal a culture that valued caution over boldness. The plant also found an unexpected place in the realm of appearance. In some regions, women used tiny amounts to brighten the eyes, believing it created a look of alert beauty. Such customs were not universal and were often discouraged by moral writers, yet they show how deeply people trusted the power of nature, even while fearing it. Monastic chroniclers reminded their readers that true beauty rested in virtue rather than in risky adornment. Their words reflected a broader medieval concern that the gifts of creation should be used for healing and necessity, not for vanity. Still, suffering often pressed people toward desperate choices. Imagine a farmer with a wound that refused to heal, the pain keeping him awake night after night. The local healer, after trying milder remedies, might finally prepare a tiny portion of belladonna. The family would gather, anxious but hopeful, knowing the line between help and harm was thin. Such moments were approached with solemnity. They were not experiments for curiosity, but acts of last resort. Belladonna also entered the stories people told about the unseen world. Because it could alter perception, some believed it opened doors best left closed. Wise priests counseled that any medicine affecting the mind should be taken only with pure intention and under watchful care. This attitude protected many from misuse. Communities developed informal rules about who could prepare the plant and when it should be offered. Knowledge was guarded not out of secrecy, but out of responsibility. Over time, the reputation of belladonna became almost symbolic. It represented the larger truth that every remedy carried two faces. The medieval medicine cabinet was not divided into safe and unsafe shelves. Rather, each jar held both promise and warning. Yet despite the risks, the plant remained part of medical practice for centuries. That endurance suggests that when handled wisely, it brought genuine relief. People would not have continued to cultivate something purely harmful. In quiet infirmaries, where candles flickered against stone walls, belladonna sometimes helped a suffering patient breathe easier. A trembling body might grow still. A mind overwhelmed by pain might find a narrow path to rest. These were small mercies, but in the Middle Ages, small mercies mattered greatly. Modern readers may focus on the danger and wonder at the courage of those who used such a plant. Medieval men and women, however, saw it differently. To them, the earth was filled with strong medicines placed there for times of need, and it was humanity's task to learn their proper measure. Belladonna taught humility. It reminded healers that knowledge must walk hand in hand with restraint. It reminded families that not every problem could be solved without risk. And above all, it reminded a hard-working world that relief from pain was a blessing never to be taken lightly. As evening settled over a village and the day's labor ended, someone might sit beside a loved one who had taken the careful dose. The room would be quiet except for breathing and the crackle of the hearth. In such moments, belladonna was not a frightening poison, but a fragile hope, handled with reverence, watched with love. Not all medieval remedies were swallowed in cups or chewed as bitter leaves. Many were applied to the skin, rubbed gently into aching muscles or placed upon wounds like quiet, patient companions. These ointments and balms formed an important part of everyday healing, especially for those who feared strong drinks or could not tolerate them. Medieval people understood something simple but wise. The body can receive help through touch as well as taste. A salve was usually made from familiar ingredients: animal fats, beeswax, olive oil, mixed with crushed herbs and warmed over a slow fire. The scent of such preparations often filled cottages and monastery infirmaries: rosemary for stiffness, plantain for cuts, comfrey for bruises. These were humble medicines, born from observation rather than theory. Healers believed that warmth opened the pathways of the body, allowing the virtue of plants to enter gently. Mothers rubbed soothing balms onto children with fevers. Farmers massaged their sore hands after long days in the fields. Pilgrims carried small jars to ease blistered feet. The act itself was part of the cure. Touch comforted as much as any ingredient. Some ointments were prepared for more serious needs. Mixtures containing stronger plants were used when pain became unbearable. These were treated with great caution and usually kept by experienced hands. Instructions emphasized that such salves should be applied sparingly and never without watchful care. Medieval medical books describe these remedies with careful language. They speak of cooling the heat of wounds, softening hardened muscles, and calming restless spirits. Though the words differ from modern science, the intention is familiar: to relieve suffering without causing new harm. Hospitals attached to monasteries often maintained entire shelves of such preparations. Brothers and sisters trained in care learned to recognize which balm suited which complaint. The knowledge was considered a form of service, an expression of compassion rooted in faith. These ointments were not created for idle curiosity. They were born from necessity. Life in the Middle Ages was physical and demanding. People worked with heavy tools, traveled on rough roads, and faced injuries that modern life rarely brings. A simple cut could grow dangerous. A twisted ankle could steal a season's livelihood. Gentle external remedies offered help when stronger medicines seemed too risky. Communities trusted these methods because they could see their effects. A swelling reduced after several days of careful dressing. A burn cooled beneath layers of honey and herbs. Such visible improvements strengthened confidence in the healer's art. Yet even the mildest salves were surrounded by reverence. Many believed that healing flowed not only from the ingredients, but from intention. A prayer might accompany the mixing of oils. Families spoke words of blessing as they cared for one another. This spirit shaped the medieval approach more than any single recipe. Some ointments were also used to prepare the body for sleep. Lavender, marjoram, and other gentle plants were blended into soft greases and rubbed onto the temples or the chest. The fragrance filled the room and invited calm breathing, a simple remedy for anxious nights. Travelers recorded how such scents reminded them of home and safety. Of course, not every mixture was harmless. A few contained powerful herbs capable of affecting the mind as well as the skin. Because of this, responsible healers insisted that strong preparations remain under supervision. The goal was always comfort, never confusion. Medieval society valued moderation. Excess was viewed as a path toward trouble in both body and soul. Ointments also played a role in caring for the dying. When illness could no longer be cured, soothing balms eased the final days. Families gathered around bedsides, applying gentle oils to dry hands, speaking quietly of memories and hope. In such moments, medicine became an act of love. These scenes remind us that medieval healing was deeply human. It did not separate treatment from relationship. To apply a salve was to say, "You are not alone in your pain." Even animals benefited from these traditions. Farmers treated injured horses with poultices of herbs and clay. Shepherds learned which leaves drew poison from a sheep's wound. The same compassion extended across all parts of daily life. Over centuries, the recipes changed little. Each generation added small improvements, but the heart of the practice remained constant. Observe, prepare with care, apply with gentleness, and wait with patience. In a world without quick cures, patience was itself a medicine. Imagine a quiet evening in a stone cottage. Rain taps against the roof while a mother warms a little pot of balm. She smooths it over her husband's tired shoulders after the harvest. The children watch the fire, breathing the familiar scent. Nothing dramatic occurs, only a gradual easing, a softening of the day's burden. This was the everyday reality of medieval ointments, not magic, not spectacle, but steady comfort. Through these simple remedies, people learned to trust the healing rhythms of the body. They discovered that care could be as important as cure, and that even when illness remained, suffering might still be eased. The medieval medicine cabinet therefore included more than plants and jars. It included hands willing to help, hearts willing to wait, and a faith that small acts of mercy mattered. While the villages of Europe relied mostly on local herbs, other parts of the medieval world knew different plants and different customs. Across the lands of Persia, Egypt, and the wider Islamic world, people were familiar with a substance called hashish, made from the resin of the cannabis plant. Its story unfolded within cultures shaped by their own faith, scholarship, and medical traditions. Medieval Islamic civilization valued learning deeply. Great cities, such as Baghdad, Cairo, and Damascus, were home to physicians, philosophers, and poets who studied the body with remarkable care. Hospitals were established where the sick received organized treatment, and medical texts were copied and improved from generation to generation. Within this environment, cannabis was discussed not as a curiosity but as a material with specific properties. Scholars described how, when prepared correctly, it could relax the body, calm anxious thoughts, and ease certain kinds of pain. They approached it with the same careful attention given to other medicines. Yet, attitudes were never simple. Religious teachers debated whether its use was appropriate, especially if taken only for pleasure. Many emphasized moderation and warned that anything clouding the mind could distance a person from prayer and responsibility. Others allowed limited medical use when guided by knowledgeable physicians. These discussions show a thoughtful society wrestling with difficult questions rather than acting carelessly. Hashish was often consumed in forms mixed with food, blended with honey, spices, or sweet pastes. This method reflected a desire to soften its strength and to avoid sudden effects. The goal, when it was usually tranquility rather than excitement. Sufi mystics devoted to seeking closeness to God through contemplation sometimes spoke of substances that helped quiet the restless self. Even here, teachers insisted that true spiritual insight came from discipline and devotion, not from any external aid. The heart, they said, must remain the guide. Stories from the period reveal ordinary people using small amounts after long days of labor, much as others drank herbal teas to unwind. Merchants traveling across deserts, sailors facing anxious nights at sea, and students weary from study all sought moments of calm. But there were also voices of caution. Rulers at various times attempted to restrict hashish, worried that excessive use could lead to idleness or neglect of duties. Physicians recorded cases where overindulgence brought confusion or melancholy. These concerns mirrored those surrounding strong herbs in Europe. Every remedy carried the risk of misuse. What is striking is the spirit of balance that shaped many medieval discussions. Neither complete acceptance nor complete rejection prevailed. Instead, communities tried to weigh benefit against harm, guided by religious principles and social responsibility. Trade routes carried cannabis knowledge far beyond its original regions. Caravans crossing North Africa and the Near East spread both the plant and the conversations around it. Travelers compared practices, how one city prepared it gently with rosewater, how another warned against it during times of fasting or prayer. Such exchanges remind us that the medieval world was connected in ways we sometimes forget. In medical writings, hashish appeared alongside other familiar treatments: poppy for severe pain, mint for digestion, frankincense for the lungs. Doctors described its qualities using the language of their time, speaking of warmth, dryness, and balance within the body. They were searching, with the tools they possessed, for ways to relieve human suffering. At the same time, poets used hashish as a symbol in verses about longing and forgetfulness. Literature reflected the tension between desire for ease and the call to live attentively. These works were not endorsements, but reflections on the human condition. For many families, the substance remained distant, known only through stories. Rural communities far from trade centers relied on their own gardens and never encountered it directly. Thus, hashish belonged more to the cities of the Islamic world than to the fields of Europe. Yet its history illustrates a broader medieval truth. Different cultures approached similar needs with different plants, guided by their own moral and spiritual frameworks. Imagine an evening in a courtyard in Cairo centuries ago. Lamps glow softly while a physician speaks with a patient troubled by persistent pain. He considers many remedies and, with careful explanation, suggests a mild preparation known in his tradition. The decision is made slowly with respect for both body and conscience. Such scenes were likely far more common than the dramatic tales later centuries invented. Modern readers sometimes imagine medieval people as reckless with intoxicating substances. The records tell another story, one of debate, caution, and the constant effort to align healing with faith. Hashish, like the European herbs we have already explored, lived in that delicate space between comfort and concern. It was neither a simple blessing nor a simple curse, but part of the long human search for relief. And across all these cultures ran a shared understanding. The mind is precious, and anything touching it must be treated with humility. As night settles in our own time, it is worth remembering that medieval men and women, whether in a Persian city or a European village, sought the same things we seek: peace, rest, and freedom from pain, while trying to remain faithful to the values that guided their lives. Long before medicines were bottled or labeled, people understood that scent itself could shape the heart and mind. In the medieval world, incense drifted through churches, monasteries, and homes, not as a drug, but as part of prayer, reverence, and daily life. To step into a stone chapel in the 12th century was to enter a different atmosphere. The air carried the warm sweetness of frankincense and myrrh, resins traded along ancient routes from Arabia and East Africa. Smoke curled upward toward painted ceilings while voices chanted psalms that had been sung for centuries. Medieval believers did not think of incense as something meant to intoxicate. It was offered as a sign of honor to God, echoing the gifts brought to Christ in the gospel story. The fragrance symbolized prayers rising to heaven, invisible yet real. Yet human senses respond naturally to their surroundings. Soft light, rhythmic chanting, and fragrant smoke together created a feeling of calm. After long hours of fasting or standing in vigil, worshippers sometimes felt light-headed or dreamlike. They interpreted this not as a high, but as the quieting of the self before the sacred. Monastic writers described how scent helped focus wandering thoughts. A brother struggling with anxiety might find his breathing slow as incense filled the choir stalls. The goal was not escape from reality, but deeper attention to it. Different resins were believed to carry different qualities. Frankincense was associated with clarity and purity. Myrrh suggested humility and remembrance. Cedar and pine spoke of strength and protection. These meanings shaped how incense was used during the Christian year. One fragrance for seasons of joy, another for times of repentance. Outside churches, incense also appeared in homes. Families burned small amounts during illness to freshen rooms or during storms to calm frightened children. In marketplaces, merchants sold cones and grains alongside candles and soap. Across the wider medieval world, the same practice existed with its own traditions. In mosques of the Islamic lands, gentle perfumes accompanied recitation of the Quran. In Jewish communities, spices and scents marked the close of the Sabbath. Each faith used fragrance as a bridge between ordinary life and holy moments. Because incense affected the senses so strongly, teachers often reminded people to keep intention pure. A pleasant feeling was welcome, but it was not the purpose. The purpose remained prayer, gratitude, and remembrance of God. Some medieval physicians even wrote that fragrance could support health by easing troubled spirits. They did not separate body from soul. Peace of mind was considered part of bodily well-being. A calm heart allowed sleep, and sleep restored strength. Still, caution was advised in enclosed spaces. Thick smoke in small chapels sometimes caused dizziness, especially during long ceremonies. Monks learned to open high windows and to burn resins gently rather than heavily. Moderation guided even sacred customs. What is beautiful in these accounts is the respect shown for human weakness. Medieval people knew that the mind can be overwhelmed by sorrow, fear, or exhaustion. Incense offered a soft, lawful comfort, not a reckless one. Imagine a winter night in a monastery. Outside, wind moves through bare trees. Inside the church, a single lamp glows before the altar, while a thin ribbon of smoke rises from a brazier. The brothers chant Compline, the last prayer of the day. The fragrance does not carry them away. It gathers their thoughts like a shepherd gathering sheep. For ordinary villagers, the experience was similar, though simpler. A mother might light a small resin as she prayed for a sick child. The scent mingled with the smell of bread and wool, turning the room into a place of hope. Incense, therefore, belonged to the spiritual medicine cabinet of the Middle Ages. It soothed without demanding forgetfulness. It invited stillness without denying reality. When later centuries spoke of medieval people becoming intoxicated by incense, they often misunderstood the intention. The medieval aim was not to blur the mind, but to settle it, to make space for reverence. Across cultures and centuries, fragrance has continued to serve this purpose. Even today, a familiar scent can calm a racing heart more gently than any potion. Thus, in the medieval story, incense stands apart from the stronger herbs we have discussed. It reminds us that not all altered feelings were sought for escape. Many were simply the natural response of human senses meeting prayer. And as evening falls over our own quiet rooms, we can understand a little of what they felt, how a gentle fragrance, rising unseen, might help the soul grow peaceful and ready for rest. Among all the substances known in the Middle Ages, alcohol was the most ordinary. It was not exotic like distant resins, nor mysterious like powerful roots. Beer, ale, mead, and wine were woven into daily life as naturally as bread and fire. One reason was simple necessity. Clean water could be difficult to find, especially in crowded towns where wells stood near waste and animals. Fermentation made liquids safer to drink. A mild ale carried fewer dangers than a doubtful stream, so families of every class kept some form of drink at hand. Most medieval alcohol was gentle by modern standards. Small beer, brewed with little strength, was consumed by adults and even children with meals. It quenched thirst without causing drunkenness. Monasteries, manors, and villages each guarded their own recipes, passed down like treasured heirlooms. Brewing was considered honest work. Monks brewed for hospitality, offering travelers a cup at the gate. Housewives brewed for their households, timing each step with the rhythm of chores. The smell of malt drifting from a kitchen was as familiar as the scent of baking bread. Stronger drinks existed as well, reserved for feasts and celebrations. Mead sweetened with honey-marked weddings and holy days. Wine accompanied church festivals and the tables of those who could afford it. These moments were meant for gratitude, not excess. Medieval teachers spoke often about moderation. Gluttony and drunkenness were listed among serious moral dangers, and sermons reminded listeners that the body was a gift to be treated with care. To drink to forget one's duties was considered a sorrowful misuse of blessing. Yet people also recognized that a warm cup could comfort the weary. After harvest labor or a long journey, sharing drink around a hearth strengthened community. Neighbors spoke of their worries, sang familiar songs, and found courage for the next day. Physicians sometimes used alcohol as a vehicle for medicine. Herbs were steeped in wine to draw out their qualities. Bitter roots were made easier to swallow. In this way, drink served healing rather than indulgence. Of course, there were times when individuals fell into excess, as in every age. Chronicles mention quarrels in taverns or careless behavior at fairs. But such stories were warnings, not ideals. The ordinary pattern of life remained steady and restrained. Imagine a village evening after the bells of Vespers. A family gathers at table with coarse bread, soup, and a small jug of ale. They speak of weather and fields, of births and marriages, of the mercy they hope for tomorrow. The drink does not carry them away, it simply accompanies their human fellowship. That was the true place of alcohol in the medieval world, a common comfort, useful and familiar, guided at its best by gratitude and self-control. Not every unusual experience in the Middle Ages came from deliberate remedies. Sometimes it arrived quietly on the dinner table, hidden within ordinary bread. This was the strange story of ergot, a fungus that could grow on rye and other grains. To medieval bakers, the dark, hardened kernels looked only slightly different from the rest of the harvest. In years of damp weather, they appeared more often, and hunger left little room for careful sorting. Grain was precious. Families used what they had. When ergot found its way into flour, the results could be unsettling. Some people felt burning pains in their limbs as though fire moved beneath the skin. Others became dizzy, confused, or troubled by vivid visions. Villages occasionally experienced outbreaks where many fell ill at once, and without knowledge of the cause, fear spread quickly. Medieval minds sought explanations in the language they knew. Illness might be seen as a trial, a punishment, or a mystery of nature. Clergy urged prayer and repentance. Healers offered soothing drinks and rest. Only slowly did communities notice that the trouble often followed certain harvests of rye. Monasteries dedicated to St. Anthony became known for caring for these sufferers, and the condition was sometimes called St. Anthony's fire. The brothers provided clean beds, nourishing wheat bread instead of rye, and patient nursing. Over time, many recovered, though some were left weakened. What is remarkable is the compassion shown despite uncertainty. People did not abandon their neighbors simply because the cause was unknown. They treated the afflicted as fellow Christians in need of mercy. Ergot reminds us how fragile medieval life could be. A family might do everything faithfully till the soil, bake the bread, give thanks at table, yet still face hardship from forces they could not see. Such experiences deepened humility and reliance on God's providence. Later centuries would uncover the biological truth of the fungus, but medieval communities responded with the tools of their time: charity, observation, and gradual learning. When they discovered that wheat bread brought improvement, they changed their habits accordingly. Imagine a small town after a difficult winter. The new loaves made from safer grain are shared among households. Slowly, the strange symptoms fade, and gratitude replaces fear. Life returns to its steady rhythm. This accidental form of intoxication was never sought or welcomed. It stood apart from medicines and customs, a reminder that not all suffering comes from human choice. Yet even here, the medieval response was guided by care for the vulnerable. In a few distant corners of the medieval world, there existed a curiosity so unusual that travelers wrote about it with wonder: mad honey. Unlike ordinary honey gathered from familiar flowers, this variety came from bees that fed on certain mountain blossoms, rich in powerful natural compounds. The best-known region was along the Black Sea coast of Anatolia, where rhododendron bushes covered steep hillsides with pink and crimson blooms. The honey produced there looked golden and innocent, yet it held an unexpected strength. Medieval merchants valued honey for many reasons. It sweetened food, preserved fruit, and served as medicine for coughs and wounds. People trusted it as one of nature's gentlest gifts. For that reason, mad honey sometimes entered homes without suspicion. Those who tasted more than a little could feel strange effects: warmth spreading through the body, dizziness, slow heartbeat, and occasionally vivid dreams. Most recovered after rest, but the experience left strong memories. Communities living near these regions learned to treat such honey with caution. Elders taught that only a small portion should be used, often mixed with other foods. In modest amounts, it was believed to ease aches and calm nerves, and some healers included it among their remedies. Travelers, however, were not always so careful. Stories tell of soldiers or merchants who found jars of local honey and ate freely, only to discover its hidden power later. Such tales passed from caravan to caravan as warnings rather than invitations. What is important is that medieval people did not view this honey as a toy. They respected it as they respected any strong medicine, useful in wise hands, troublesome in careless ones. Physicians who wrote about it compared its effects to those of other potent herbs, advising moderation and rest if symptoms appeared. Families kept watch over anyone affected, offering water and quiet until the body regained balance. The existence of mad honey also reminded people how closely human life depended on the wider creation. Even bees, gentle workers of the fields, could carry both sweetness and danger according to the flowers they touched. Imagine a mountain village where such honey was known. A grandmother measures a tiny spoon into warm milk for a neighbor troubled by pain, careful not to exceed the old limits taught by her mother. The remedy is given with gratitude and with prayer that it may help without harm. In this way, mad honey found its place within medieval healing, not as a pursuit of excitement, but as another example of nature's complicated gifts. Like many things in the past, it asked for humility. People learned that the earth offers blessings that must be handled with understanding, and that even the most pleasant flavors can hide unexpected strength. Beyond monasteries and trained physicians, medieval villages relied on another kind of care, the wisdom of local healers. These men and women were not scholars in distant universities, yet they often understood the needs of their neighbors better than anyone. They were known by many names: herbalists, wise folk, midwives, bone setters. Their knowledge grew from long observation of fields, animals, and human lives. A healer might recognize which plant eased a cough because she had seen it help her own children. Another learned to bind broken limbs from years of tending farmers and shepherds. Communities trusted them because they lived the same hardships. Such healers usually worked with simple tools: a mortar and pestle, jars of dried leaves, cloth for bandages, and a keen memory. They prepared teas for fevers, poultices for wounds, and soothing ointments for tired joints. Their art was practical, shaped by necessity rather than theory. Faith often guided their work. Many began treatment with prayer, asking that God bless the remedy and the patient. Healing was seen as cooperation between human effort and divine mercy, not as something achieved by skill alone. Midwives held especially honored roles. They brought new life into the world and cared for mothers afterward, using gentle herbs to calm pain and strengthen recovery. In an age when childbirth was perilous, their presence offered courage and comfort. Of course, misunderstandings sometimes arose when illness did not improve. Frightened people searched for reasons, and healers could be blamed unfairly. Yet in everyday life, most were valued members of the community, called upon again and again. Their approach to stronger plants was cautious. They knew that certain roots and leaves required experience, and they warned against careless use. Knowledge was shared quietly from teacher to apprentice so that it would not be misused. What distinguished these healers was their closeness to those they served. They sat beside beds through long nights, listened to worries, and understood family histories. Medicine for them was not a trade alone, but a relationship. Imagine a small village at dawn. A neighbor knocks at the healer's door seeking help for a sick child. Without complaint, she gathers her basket, walks the muddy path, and prepares a mild drink while speaking gentle words to the frightened mother. Such scenes were the true heart of medieval care. These humble practitioners formed a bridge between learned medicine and everyday life. Their work reminds us that healing has always depended as much on compassion as on ingredients. When we look back at the Middle Ages, it is easy to imagine people either fearful of every strong plant or carelessly experimenting with anything they found. The truth lay somewhere between. Medieval men and women approached relief from pain with a mixture of hope, caution, faith, and experience. They did not think in modern categories of recreational or medical. Instead, they asked simpler questions. Will this ease suffering? Will it harm the soul? Is it used with gratitude and moderation? Most communities judged substances by their purpose. A remedy taken to calm agony or bring sleep was accepted more readily than something used only for escape. Religious teaching shaped these attitudes, reminding people that the mind was a gift to be guarded. At the same time, the hardships of daily life created compassion for those who sought comfort. Long labor, illness, and grief were constant companions. If a plant or drink softened those burdens, neighbors rarely condemned it when used responsibly. Stories from the period show this balance. Monks recorded both successes and failures of medicines. Town councils warned against excess while allowing healers to continue their work. Families passed down careful instructions rather than reckless encouragement. Medieval society understood something we sometimes forget: relief and responsibility must walk together. They also recognized that not every unusual experience was chosen. Illness, spoiled grain, or unfamiliar honey could trouble the mind without intention. In such cases, the proper response was care, not judgment. Faith remained the steady center. People believed that true peace came from God and that earthly remedies were tools to be used humbly. Even when strong medicines were necessary, they were surrounded by prayer and watchfulness. This attitude shaped the entire medieval medicine cabinet. Henbane, mandrake, belladonna, fragrant incense, ordinary ale, all were viewed through the lens of service to life rather than pursuit of excitement. Imagine again a medieval household as night approaches. The day's work is finished, a simple drink is shared, a balm applied to sore hands, a candle lit before rest. These acts are not attempts to flee the world but to endure it with courage. In that spirit, the people of the Middle Ages sought what we still seek: sleep after weariness, comfort after pain, and hope amid uncertainty. Their methods were imperfect, yet their intentions were often kind. They remind us that history is not only a tale of strange customs, but of familiar hearts doing their best with the knowledge they possessed. And as this quiet account draws to a close, you can let those distant centuries fade like the last glow of a hearth. Breathe slowly, rest your thoughts, and allow the gentle rhythm of history to carry you towards sleep. Good night.